Good Wednesday evening, friends and patriots. We got some stuff to talk about. The big story that came out of the news yesterday, Atlanta DA filed more charges or indicted charges on Donald Trump, rather, for things up to and including RICO statute violations. Now, RICO statute violations, by the way, are statutes that were put in place basically to go after the organized mob back when the five major mob crime families ran places like New York City, and it was difficult for the long arm of the law to grab the people at the top, and by design the mobs had made it that way. Anyway, the thing that's interesting with using RICO statutes is that the way they play it out, they have to say that it's an ongoing, or it has to meet the definition of an ongoing organized crime network that's, something more than just a little bit loosely affiliated. And if we're going to go by this standard, then every Hollywood actor that was in this little piece from Hollywood should also be indicted.
Make one of the most important decisions in its history. You have a chance.
You have an obligation
to be a part of that decision.
You might think it's not important. You might think you're not important,
but that's not true.
So that was a PSA that was put out by Hollywood. It had a bunch of liberal elites who think that they are way smarter than the rest of us because they drive high-end vehicles, and they have offices that smell of rich leather and mahogany. Basically putting out a direct message to the electors from the various states to, instead of going back to follow what they were obliged to do, which was make the votes according to the votes that took place in each individual state and district, that they should throw the election by voting their choice instead of what the individual populace sent them to Washington to do. So that's one thing. If we're gonna apply this loosely, then it's absolutely absurd. If anybody's got any kind of consenting idea for what the popular idea is, I guess at the time, then I guess you are subject to RICO statute violations in Georgia. The next thing is we're up to 4 indictments now with Trump, and so most of this stuff stems back to January 6, 2021, the transition of power. When the electors were going to vote and everything was going to come permanent. Several people are back in Washington, D.C. protesting, including a bunch of embedded federal agency personnel. And so they've had from January 6, 2021 until we're now at the middle of August 2023. So, in another 4 months, they've had 4 years to put this case together. All of a sudden, all these DAs that are going after Trump and indicting him, they want to rush these charges. They want to rush them and bring them in, like within the next 9 months. That number one, the first problem with that is they've had a legion of agents and attorneys compiling their case, their prosecution against Donald Trump for 3 years. Just the discovery process should take at least half of that, which would be a year and a half for Donald Trump's defense team to put on their own defense. The reason why they're pressing this is they don't care about Donald Trump being indicted or not. They don't care about Donald Trump going to prison. What they're worried about is Donald Trump getting back into power and taking theirs away. They think that if they can get all of these legal settings going at the same time, right around the time that the primaries are starting to take off, and we're looking down the barrel of the election for the next presidential election, they want him to be so embroiled in all this stuff that he can't compete. Well, a couple things. Number one, it's backfiring on him because every time one of these stupid charges gets levied against him, his popularity just seems to continue to rise. I think you're seeing a lot of independents across the nation realize what is really going on here, which is the DOJ has been politically weaponized against Trump by the Democrats that are in the White House and others. And they simply want to throw the race. They want to, what they're charging Donald Trump with, they want to interfere with an election using the court system and get him so bogged down in the court system that he can't run a campaign. This whole thing is humorous for a couple of reasons. Number one, any big metropolitan area, even around here, like Salt Lake County, you can have misdemeanor charges that will not see court from the time that they are filed and a person is booked into jail, sometimes for a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. You never get this fast of a speedy trial, and in most cases it's because the defense waives the right to a speedy trial simply because they don't have enough time to prepare. Sometimes it behooves them and their client to drag things out for other reasons, but a big part of it is they lack the time to give a good preparation for a defense. So basically what you've got is all these various things that are indicted. There's been a famous saying, in New York, you could, I don't remember exactly what it is, but you can indict a cheeseburger. Indictments don't really mean anything, and it is quite easy to get an indictment on anybody if for no other reason that during an indictment there is no defense position. You're only hearing one side of the argument. The prosecutors putting up their evidence and putting on their opinions, and you don't get that countered. You don't get cross-examinations. You don't get information oftentimes that would behoove the case for the person that's being indicted. So that's one thing. So Alan Dershowitz, if you're not familiar with Alan Dershowitz, which you should be, he is a brilliant legal scholar. He practiced law for a long time. He taught law and was a professor at Harvard for a long time. He's been around the block. He's something like he's in his early to mid 80s right now, and he is a registered Democrat. This is what Alan Dershowitz has to say about the whole thing. Let's see. Bear with me for a second. Okay.
How do you see what was laid out here? What do you see as the plus and minus, Professor?
You use the key word. This is a novel prosecution. What I used to tell my students is prosecutors ought to be C students, not A students. Prosecutors have to go with the law as it is. Nothing novel, nothing unique. Now, if you want to multiply that 10 times, when you're going after the man who is the leading candidate to run against the current president of the United States, you have to have the most mundane, most convincing, most traditional, most precedential case imaginable. You cannot stretch the law. You cannot be creative. You cannot try to be novel. In the end, it's conceivable she might win the case, but she's known for stretching the law.
She is the DA in
and when you're
Atlanta.
going after the man who is running for president and you don't want to become a banana republic, you have to apply the Nixon standard. When Nixon was threatened with impeachment and prosecution, Republicans and independents all supported that because it was the most traditional case. Erasing tapes, bribing witnesses, nothing novel, no RICO, no extraordinary conspiracy. So this fails because it's an A-plus indictment.
So that video goes on, and Dershowitz really breaks it down and makes sense of exactly what's going on here. But the long story of the short is, when people are indicted by grand juries on this level, this categorization of crime, oftentimes it's maybe not easy, but it's likely to get a conviction. But, and here's the big but, and this is why it shows you that they do not care about him getting tried. They do not care about whether he goes to prison or not. They just care about him getting knocked out of this race. Most cases of this type of nature that are indicted, that go before a court, that get convicted, almost the vast majority of this type of stuff gets overturned on appeal. They don't care about an overturn on appeal, because by the time the appeals process happens, 2024 is come and gone, folks. And that's all they're worried about, is getting him out of the picture for the next presidential election. This is the biggest gross abuse of power that this nation has seen in a long time, with the Department of Justice and the executive branch of government and some of these filthy rat lying Democrats in Congress and in the Senate that just lie through their teeth about what's really going on here today. It's absolutely despicable. And you know, they talk about worrying about democracy, and you know, spaghetti brains, Kamala and of course her much less intelligent cohort Biden. They'll talk about things. Kamala was asked the other day, what do you think about when you wake up in the morning? And she pontificates in her mind silently for a minute and says, "Oh, democracy." She doesn't even know what the word means. These people are so far out there, and they are willing, capable, and able to do any kind of dirty, low down, below the belt, dirt slinging, fighting to salvage and preserve their power, that the mere thought of just lying to you outright like they do all the time, it doesn't bother them. It doesn't bother them one bit. But keep your eye on the ball. One of the big things with the Democrats, their biggest tell for the last several years is whatever they've accused their opposition of doing is what they are actively doing. This goes back to, you know, when the Obama's DOJ was wiretapping Trump Towers. They got a FISA warrant. They lied about it. And the big problem is nobody is ever being held accountable. Nobody. Until people start being held accountable on this stuff, this is going to continue to happen until the nation fractures. And I weep for the future if we can't turn this ship around, because it's not going to be pretty. But until I get some more good stuff, we'll see you next time.